it's not, how to describe it. It's like, it's just saying exactly what it means to say.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's like, there's nothing extra that's there. There's no like throat clearing. It's just like,
oh, I love that.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's really
but anyway, yeah.
This is most of her writing, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Everybody.
Oh wow, yeah, no, I'll have to check that out. Am I ready? Yeah.
Okay, we're recording and I'm gonna let everybody in.
Okay.
Cool.
Already is video. It's hilarious.
There's Jan.
Oh yeah.
That's it. It's okay to keep your cameras on, but if you could just mute. Thank you so much. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a few minutes to let everyone enter the room, virtually walk in. Done.
Oh, there's Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Catherine.
Hi.
Yeah, as we're waiting for others to arriving, thanks guys so much for coming.
Yeah.
And if you want to put your cameras on, that's cute, but if you don't, we understand also. And especially thanks to those of you who've been on Zoom all day already and are doing some extracurricular Zooming. Appreciate it.
Hey, Jack.
Hey.
I see Susan Timms.
We'll give it another
Great.
minute or so.
My cat's here just in time for us to get started. So,
Good looking cat.
thank you. She loves to hear that.
All right. So you guys will get started, and sure people will file in as the event gets going. Welcome everyone to Exile and Bookbill's Authors on Tap reading series. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert, we co-run Exile and Bookbill, an online entity with solid plans to open a physical space in Chicago by the end of the summer. This is our first stab at hosting on Eventbrite, so thanks to everyone for tuning in and purchasing books from tonight's event, as it goes a long way towards ensuring that we open our doors later this year. Tonight, we're so very excited to host Forsyth Harmon and help celebrate the release of her debut novel, Justine, which recently turned 1 week old. Congratulations, Forsyth. Forsyth will be in conversation with Chicago's own Catherine Lacey, whose slight but very powerful novel, Pew, was one of my favorites of 2020. Thanks, Catherine, for being here as well. I have a few things to mention about tonight's event before we get started. We will post links to books by both of our guests in the chat that will make the purchasing process as easy as pie. And as an added bonus, each will come with a signed book plate. And not to need any excuse to buy and read Justine, but knowing that it was just named one of BuzzFeed's 27 spring books that they could not put down should help in making that decision to buy the book. Congratulations again, Forsyth. Towards the end of the conversation, should you have any questions or comments, please use the raise hand function or type them in the chat, and Catherine will ask those questions and pass along those comments about 45 minutes in. Feel free to keep your camera on during the event, but please mute yourselves until called upon to answer your question, to ask your question. So our bookstore name is an obvious nod to Liz Phair's seminal 1993 debut album, Exile in Guyville. So anytime the novel makes any musical references, it warms my heart. Justine does that in spades and with really cool music. It was nice to reading the book and then going to listen to the song as I was reading. I've read it like 3 times already. I couldn't help but hope, though, that in the pages that were written in your head that didn't make it into the novel, that there was a passage where Allie and Justin were cruising around Long Island, wasting time singing along with Jonathan Richman as he belts out that he's going to drive past the Stop and Shop from the Modern Lovers classic song Roadrunner. I'm going to bow out now. That's said enough. And pass this along to Catherine. So everyone grab a cocktail and please help us in welcoming Forsyth Harmon and enjoy the show. Have a good show, you guys.
Thanks, Javier. And thanks for having us here, and thanks for Forsyth for writing this book. I am so excited to talk to you, just in general, because you're one of my favorites, and in particular because I don't think I've really come across a book like this and that feels so contemporary and inevitable and yet somehow like missing, you know. There's something about the tone and kind of the elegance and the minimalism of Justine that has always drawn me in, and I've seen it in earlier stages and coming up to this, and it's like physically such a beautiful object. It's this, we were talking earlier about how I wish all hardcover books could be printed this way, this paper over board, no slip cover. She's just like, she's ready to go. So, and congratulations on it. And yeah, we were talking about whether I should like do your bio, but it's like, it's funny because a lot of times when these bios are read, like, so Forsyth and I co-authored a book, the first book that you did, I got to be a part of, and your beautiful illustrations were really the whole point of our book, The Art of the Affair, which was like one of the best collaborations. I mean, let me just say, the best collaboration experience I've ever had. And since then, Forsyth's gone on to illustrate Melissa Febos's memoir that I think just came out a couple months ago, also Girlhood, and really your illustrations are the reason that we first met. What year was it? Do we even know?
I feel like it was 2013.
Somewhere in there, maybe? Yeah. You were tasked with illustrating some poems of a friend of mine, Kendra Grant Malone, and I thought it was such a good pairing, your illustrations and her poems. And Kendra's one of my best friends. She and I were like, how do we get Forsyth to be our best friend? He's so cool. And I was like, I know, like, I'll trap her into like making a book with me. And so that's what I did.
I didn't need any trapping. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. So do you want me to read from the book first, or do we want to start talking about how it came to be, or give any context for it first?
I think read first. Okay. I love that we're doing it this way. So while Catherine reads, I'm actually going to screen share some of the illustrations. So if you haven't seen the book, we can leverage one of the better parts of being virtual. And I'll actually screen share earlier versions of the pages, so they might not exactly match up with what she's saying, but you'll have a little bit of a sense of the book while she reads.
I think the only setup, I guess you don't really totally need any setup, except that the main character, Allie, has gotten a job at this Stop and Shop, and now she's starting. When Justine lowered the red Stop and Shop apron over my head, it felt like an anointment. A name tag had already been affixed to the left breast. It said, Allison. But my name is Allie. That's just a nickname. She tugged at my hair. It's what my birth certificate says. Allison's better. She wrapped the apron strings around my waist and tied them into a neat bow just above my belly button. I flushed with the intimacy of it. Justine taught me how to bag groceries, how to construct the most efficient bottom-heavy grids like playing Tetris, how to distribute the weight evenly across each bag, how to bag by category, refrigerated items in one, household cleaners in another. She taught me the Apple PLU codes, Brayburn, 41, see, I would be a bad grocer person, 4103, Gala 4133, Macintosh 4152. She taught me how to tell the difference between cucumbers, cold, waxy, and bumpy, and zucchini, rough and dry, without once insinuating male genitalia. She showed me how to casually turn my back on not even a very rude customer and spit on her strawberries. Watching Justine at the register from my end of the conveyor belt, I was learning other things too, things she didn't say. Like after I saw her make several trips to the bathroom, I learned that vomiting was one way to counteract eating freely from the candy rack. When she passed items down to me to be bagged, I saw the small red cut marks on her first and third knuckles. I learned during downtimes which magazines I should and shouldn't read, and when she actually took away my 17, putting it back on the rack and replacing it with Vogue. On the cover, Kate Moss's face stood in for the G. She was laughing so hard, her eyes were closed, her terrible but somehow endearing teeth exposed. She wore nothing but dark denim jeans, her fingers covering her nipples. The thinnest women never look slutty, no matter how slutty they are. Justine stabbed at my fingers at Kate's bare stomach. They say that she had ribs removed to accentuate her waist. Really? Kate was entirely naked on page 185, a tiny square of pubic hair, her nipples erect. How long her nipples were. I brought the magazine to my face. On the next page in profile, they were grotesque, the left one a little inverted. She's only 5'6", you know, Justine said. I'm 5'6". Justine shrugged. At the end of our shift, Justine offered me a ride. I followed her out back to the brick red Lesabre? I never knew how to say that actually.
I think Lesabre.
Okay.
The Saab. I'm not sure.
Never had such a car. Like that was what we did every day. The interior was immaculate. She pulled down the sun visor and studied herself in the vanity mirror, then fumbled through her purse for a tweezer, which she took to her eyebrows with great ferocity, creating little pink wounds where she attempted to prematurely excavate ingrown hairs as though they were mites infesting her brow bone. When she turned the ignition key, a strange, meandering falsetto pealed through the car. I didn't know what the music was, but tapped my fingers on the door handle as though it were familiar. The lyrics posed an existential question about the mind-body divide. Justine sang along. She was so off-key, she must have been tone-deaf. She didn't put on her seatbelt. She took 3 speed bumps hard and fast, racing toward the adjacent lot, turning into the Hess station. Her bare thighs did not spread across the seat like mine did. They were no wider than her calves. I went up on the balls of my feet to bring mine in a little. A tall, tan, dark-haired boy shuffled out of the Express Mart, jeans slung low, pant legs so wide you couldn't see his shoes. His Yankees cap sat high on his head, the brim angled 45 degrees to the side. Justine pulled up to the pump and the boy shook his head. She rolled down the window. Tank's on the other side, he said, laughing, flagging us right. Justine huffed, backed up, and pulled forward to the pump on the other side of the aisle. I rolled down the passenger window, and the boy looked in past me at Justine very seriously, dark eyes half closed, lashed interminable. His nose was large and irregular. He must have broken it, but that one imperfection seemed to exaggerate his beauty. His name tag said what I thought was Chris. I couldn't quite make out the bubbly Sharpie graffiti. Sitting there between them, I felt ordinary. My thighs spread miserably, my legs were disproportionately short, especially my calves, my torso too long, and my features were too large to be considered fine. My hair was long and thick, but coarse. It had the tendency to get frizzy, and my fingers should have been thinner, but my skin was too thin, making me prone to cuts and scars. Justine stared straight ahead and made her mouth a long, straight line. Chris unscrewed the gas cap, filled the tank. Another boy appeared at the driver's side. He pushed himself through the open window, leaned across Justine, and turned off the car stereo. She swatted his wiry arm and opened her mouth around it like she might bite. She had big teeth. This boy was ugly, with a smug smile and crooked incisors. His freckled features crowded into the middle of his broad white face, pinched into an expression of demanding dissatisfaction. He looked directly at me, with narrow eyes so black I couldn't see into them. It was the look of a person who'd heard a rumor about you, but won't say what it is, doesn't care if it's true, actually prefers and even enjoys being offended by you. His name tag said Ryan. Yo, he droned, leaning his forearms against Justine's sill, nodding at me. Who's she? His fingers were long, dirt collected beneath them. Justine reached her arm around me and squeezed. Isn't she cute? She kissed me on the cheek, and I felt it everywhere. Allison. I just let her call me that. That's who I would be with these people. So I'm just going to stop there. But it continues. So you do get a little bit of a sense of how intense and almost violent the relationship is between Allie and Justine. And to me, I mean, I was a teenage girl around the same time. It's alarmingly accurate about this kind of potency that it could exist between teenage girls that kind of don't quite understand how quickly people can fall into each other and begin to mimic each other, and like what does that even mean? It's like, it's terrifying. I'm just wondering for you, like where did the book begin? I guess that's kind of a broad question, but we can start in a broad place and get narrower as we go.
Yeah, it did begin with a short story that took place in a grocery store and its surrounding parking lot. Although initially the story was interested in the relationship between Allie and Ryan, the character who's so lovingly described on the final pages Catherine just read. And Justine, I'm not even sure if she was in that first story. But as the novel expanded, her place in it grew, and my interest shifted to the relationship between the girls.
Yeah, I heard somebody talking recently about a book about asexuality. I swear this is a tangent, but it's going to come back. That people that are asexual notice the fact that every book, every novel, everything, every work of art seems to have some kind of romantic relationship, generally a heterosexual romantic relationship at its core or somewhere sort of central to it. And people that have different kinds of relationships notice how fixated a culture can be on like a particular kind of romantic relationship. Especially, I feel like in teenage novels, the natural thing is like, unrequited love between like girls and boys, and these kind of tragic love, at that young age or something. But what I love about this is there's really has, and it only been maybe in the last few years have writers, I think, really started to tackle the female friendship question. And I feel like there was a moment when like there was suddenly like a spurt of books that were focused on friendships between women.
Yeah, Ferrante really superpowered that.
Yeah, but there's like a dark side to it that I feel like is not explored as much as I feel like it is in Justine. And I wonder if like getting older sort of made you look back at like youth with like what seems interesting to us when we're younger, I think or like kind of the more obvious points, but then I guess as we get older we sort of see, oh no, this relationship was actually much more interesting than that one that I was spending all my time on.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yes, I do think time is a part of it, but I also think repetition. I mean, I don't think these kinds of relationships are relegated to adolescence. And I think my life has been really like marked by like several of these sort of obsessive kind of mirroring types of relationships with other women. I suppose I thought I might sort of rewind to the source maybe, and take a look at, what one of those seminal dynamics might look like, as a way of beginning to explore a pattern.
Did you feel like did you unlock any patterns in it, or like?
I mean, I guess the question that comes up, I sort of went in with a question, I'm coming out with another one, is, when are we losing ourselves and when are we finding ourselves? And it feels really impossible to know at the time, and sort of only obvious in retrospect. I guess I might say that spending a lot of time thinking about these kinds of dynamics has slowed me down in terms of the way that I approached friendships and relationships. Just sort of knowing that that tendency exists in me.
Yeah, and that it's like I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations about this with other friends lately about the kind of I feel like we were trained for so long to think of our romantic relationships as the ones in like where, I mean, for instance, to use your words, where we're finding ourselves, like where our true identity really lies with this one other person that they're kind of the exclusive holder of who we are. But actually it can be shocking to find that there's maybe more of you or a very powerful part of you that's located in friendships. And I mean, I feel like there's no, I don't want to spoil any of the like kind of dynamic and tension that's in the book, which I don't really think it can be spoiled, but it's not, their relationship is never clearly spoken between them. I don't feel like they ever like really give a name to the thing that's happening between them. And we're not, also because we're in Allie's point of view so much, we don't really completely know how Justine feels about the whole situation. And that's like part of the, I feel like, engine that sort of drives the book. Was there ever a version of the book where you like had more of Justine's side or point of view really like as a focal point?
No, she always remained fairly mysterious. However, yes, it was my intention to keep sort of the nature of their connection mysterious. So is it a friendship? Is it an obsession? Is it romantic? Is it not? I don't think Allie knows or has the language, and I did not, as the quote wiser older author, like want to put too much of my presence onto that and make a judgment on it. I think I wanted the reader to have their own experience of it. And part of the delight of speaking with other readers and writers since the book has come into the world is seeing how differently they have read it.
Yeah.
So in some circumstances, it's very obvious to the reader that this is a romantic relationship, while, to others that didn't cross their mind at all. I like a book that allows the reader some space to bring their own point of view.
Yeah, same. It ends up being kind of their relationship is sort of a Rorschach, where like how you actually define relationships ends up being reflected in what you see there. Yeah. There's also like one of the things I really admire about it is how matter of fact and honest you are about depicting like disordered eating at that age.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also something I feel like people are like sort of have fewer hangups about like talking about now. But I still think that it's very difficult to do what you've done here, which is just like render it without like sentimentality or judgment. And I wondered how you thought of approaching like depicting disordered eating and
Yeah, thank you. I very specifically didn't want it to be a book only about that.
Right.
It was a book that contained characters that struggled with it. This has been another interesting part of the experience of bringing the book into the world. In some cases, I've had feedback where readers have felt really seen by it. And in other cases, these are not necessarily mutually exclusive reactions, by the way. There have been like requests for the trigger warning.
Right.
And, I think my hope was, as you said, to render the facts of it, as directly as possible, without judgment, without sort of the wisdom of years, as a way of just, I guess, recording an experience.
I mean, it also seems related to a kind of like a stylistic decisions that you've made. The book is very minimal. The way that characters are described, the kind of glimpses that you get of interior states, everything is drawn with like very crisp lines. I mean, and in a way, it reminds me actually a lot. I mean, of course, naturally, I make comparisons between your drawings and your writing. Having first known you through your work, which your visual work, which I feel like has such a distinct style, and it's one of those. I feel like illustration has a way of like Jesse was showing me that we were looking at the illustrations in the Wind in the Willows the other day, and just like kind of marveling at like, how did he do that? You're looking at it and you're like, there's not like it's just lines, and then it's just this little character in this certain way that he's turned, and this certain like cross hatching of certain lines, and it feels so inevitable when you're looking at it, and yet you couldn't replicate it. Like, I mean, I couldn't replicate your visual style, nor could anybody. And I don't. There's so much personality and specificity in your drawings, and I wonder if you have, I don't know, having done this for as long as you have in both mediums, I wonder if you have found any kind of like common rubric between how you make decisions in your illustration and how you make decisions in the fiction.
Yeah. I think I always look for the most economical solution that I can. I just get a kind of thrill out of cutting. I have loved poetry. We met at a poetry reading.
That's right.
and was really inspired by poetry when I first began this book. And two, my husband is a scholar of contemporary poetics, and recently published a book literally on minimal art and writing.
Oh, that's right.
And so we have sort of overlapped in an interesting way, and I've been inspired by a lot of the work that he's written about. But yeah, I think I bring that approach to both the writing and the drawing in terms of like what I choose to depict and how I depict it. I'm interested in the project of trying to get something across with like as few words and lines as possible.
Was that something, like, can you talk a little bit about the revision process? Like I know about it, but I kind of wanted to hear you explain it, like the different versions of this novel that happened over the last couple of years. And
Yeah.
was this kind of paring down part of the decisions you made there?
Yeah, it was in both the writing and the drawing. As I mentioned, it began as a short story, which then grew in length and in images. And at first, similar to the images that I painted for the Art of the Affair, I was working in full color watercolors, which were in fact quite a bit looser even than the images in the Art of the Affair, which have that kind of similarly contained feeling, I think, to a lot of the images here. And the writing too, when I look at it, was a lot looser and sort of more meandering, I guess I would say. And a certain point came, which was the point of my thesis conference in my MFA, where I presented this project to the committee. And a person who had been deemed a genius told me to remove all the images and they wouldn't do, and this had to be a traditional novel. And so I went ahead and rewrote it as a traditional novel, and was devastated, but did it anyway. But actually learned so much about writing just by focusing on the writing for a while. And that's when the Economy project, I think, began.
Can you describe a little bit of that, and people can go to your website to see the images from it? That's also oh wait, are you talking about the economizing in the
yes
book?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you were. I was like, I
You're
realized
thinking of a previous project.
Yes.
Yeah, but no, the project of sort of really looking at words and phrases as like discrete elements and thinking very carefully about sort of the puzzle of making the book as succinct as I could. And after spending some time focusing specifically on that, I did feel enough confidence to return to the images. I'd always felt that they belonged, but then redrew them in terms of both what I depicted and how I depicted it in black and white in order to align with the revised written aesthetic.
Yeah.
And so that's how it came to be in its current form.
And you did all the layout as well.
Yes, I did. I worked with the help of a person who was more capable than I in InDesign. But the layout was also sort of a part of the creation of the manuscript,
right?
Which was then refined with Tin House and their amazing designer. And that was sort of the resolution of that journey.
Are you still, so to me it seems very challenging to try and get images and words to cooperate in this way, and I wonder if, I know that you've worked on a lot of other projects at this point, but are you still like processing story in this way, or are you writing in a just text way now, or are you still always thinking about the images that would sort of correlate, or the relationship between?
Yeah, but both. So I'm looking right now and working on a book. It's also a novel, and it also has images, but the images function a bit differently.
Okay.
But I am still interested in that interplay. It's something I've done since I was a very small person, and have also done professionally in like advertising and marketing.
Right.
So the sort of image text storytelling is just, it's where my brain likes to live.
Genius.
I'm an Instagram girl. I'm not a Twitter girl, you know. So
your story of your thesis conference and taking the note that is, you know, ultimately just incorrect, but it's difficult not to, you know, take the word of your teachers at that age, especially. It reminds me of Shelley Jackson, the writer and artist and multi-hyphenate Wonder Woman. This is like many years ago, and it's possible that I have misremembered this and it's actually somebody else, so don't like go print this anywhere. But she was speaking on a panel and she was talking about doing her MFA, I think, in visual art, but writing also. And she had some sort of conference with, or maybe it was the other way around, maybe it was writing and painting, but she had a conference with one of her, you know, male advisors, and he said, oh, you know, that she had to pick one and focus. And she was like, yeah, you know, I don't see it that way. I don't think I have to pick one. And he said, oh, Shelley, are you going to be an artist, or are you going to be a housewife? As if like, if she continued to dabble, then she would have to, you know, just be, she could never finish anything, which I keep in the back of my head at all times when I feel like there's something else I want to do other than like the medium I'm immediately working in. It's like, I'm not going to be a housewife, you know?
Yeah. Not that that's also not
totally
a valid choice.
Totally valid choice, but just, you know.
But right, it's not a binary.
Nobody else gets to tell you.
Yeah, it's not a binary.
Exactly. I want to let people know that you can ask questions, I guess, out loud if you do the raise hand thing, but this is new to me, so there might be a little bit of a learning curve. So I don't know if anybody has raised a hand, but
yeah, if you want to raise your hand like Liv has, you can hit the reactions button, and then there's a little raise hands icon.
Okay, cool.
And then hosts can unmute. Okay, or cool. I think you can self unmute. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hear what Liv has to ask, and then maybe I'll continue to ask you a couple questions. But since we have one,
I'm just interested in the legend. I want to know what poetry reading it was where you two met one another.
Yeah, it was an Atlas poetry reading run by Natalie.
Yeah.
Yes. Yay! At what was the name of that place?
Local 61, I think, or 61 local.
Yep, 61 local
on Bergen Street.
On Bergen Street. Yep.
Okay, that's it.
That was a good time.
Was a good time in
poetry.
Do you remember this? Eileen Miles was dating like a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah, Leopoldine Core.
That's right. It was very exciting.
I could do a whole event on like circa 2012 poetry gossip. So
yeah, those were good times.
Yeah, they were.
Okay. Well, I also wanted to ask you about what collaboration for you. I mean, I know what it was like when I collaborated with you, which is like, I felt like you were doing all the work and the organizing and like I feel like you were the engine that kind of ran it. But
I felt like I was being such an annoying like project manager,
no way,
wanting to get everything in Excel and.
No. It was very, very helpful. I feel like it was for me. I know what it was like to collaborate with you. I'm wondering what it's like for you to collaborate with other writers. How do you, like with the Melissa Febos project, for instance, could you just please explain?
Yeah. I really love collaborating with writers, which is why I keep returning to it. It's such an interesting way to work together in what is usually a sort of solitary practice, and also gain like a different kind of insight into the texture of someone's mind. And I really liked working with Melissa on her essay collection, Girlhood, which is actually coming out on the 30th of this month.
Aha.
It's a collection of 8 essays, and I illustrated a chapter frontispiece for each essay. And so essentially, as I read each essay, I've been saying it's sort of like it was like a sifting for gold exercise, sort of like what images or impressions are in here that are popping out for me, that feel like they represent the intention of the whole, and how can I sort of bring them together in a single image to represent that essay? And then 2, how can I look at all of the images across the collection as a kind of constellation of the intentions of the entire collection? And so, each drawing, speaks specifically to its own essay, but it's also sensitive to sort of the suite of drawings, and how they speak to the book as a whole. And I would like to mention that Melissa and I will be doing a fundraiser for the organization Girls Right Now.
Oh, cool.
Starting on the 22nd of this month. And you can purchase prints of the illustrations from that book to benefit the organization. So there'll be more on my Instagram, as there has been much on it these past couple of weeks. Thank you for your patience. But yeah, it's a fun process.
Forsyth's Instagram is amazing. If you happen to not be there, it's just like constantly beautiful, and you'll be glad you're looking at it every time. We do have some typed questions, so I'm gonna read one from Jean Quack. If you're working on a project that's strictly text or strictly visual based, do you ever turn to the other to help flesh out your ideas? Like the project is text based, but you have to draw something to help you figure it out, or vice versa.
Oh yeah, that's a fun question. Yeah, I'm a planner, and I think I'm a visual planner. And so I'll often use outlines or diagrams when I'm working on something visual or textual. And so, yes, there often will be this point in time where I'll bring out a pen and paper and map something out, so that I can hold the concept in my mind visually before I put too much effort toward it.
This is like a little bit silly, but I guess partially because I've got Wind in the Willows in the brain, and then Alice in Wonderland, and like all these wonderful books that were like both prose and beautiful prose and interspersed with illustration, and like these things were in dialogue with each other. But I think Wind in the Willows is a wonderful book for adults, but it's made me think, is Forsyth ever, now that you have, how old is your son? Is 4?
He's just turning 4.
Do you think about, I feel like this is like a natural turn for like many writers that I admire, like once they have kids that are like at that age, they write children's books and they find illustrators, but you got it all in house. So I wonder if you've been like thinking about that at all.
I have been thinking about it, and it's always been an ambition of mine.
Really?
Yes. And I think until the past few years, when I feel like I've sort of gotten my act together, I always felt sort of like I wasn't quite qualified, to sort of
only highly qualified people worry that they're not qualified.
Influence the minds of children. And in some ways, this book and the next 2 that I'm working on feel a bit like a process of sort of excoriating my disqualifications or something, so that I can then be sort of, the pure Forsyth that will put forth the luminary children's illustrations and text. I'm not sure where that story came from, but it's one that I've told myself.
I think part of the beauty of the way that you put Justine together, and as you said, like didn't inflict a sort of adult perspective back on it, is that you really do see and feel like while you're reading it very emotionally how locked into certain images and expectations it can feel to be a young woman. And I mean, I only have the mid 90s to mid 2000s childhood to compare it to, but like it's tough. And I feel like these like the thing that you're describing of like feeling unqualified or like not yet prepared or somehow like ill-equipped to do something that you're extremely equipped to do and like long have been, actually I feel like is partially a byproduct of the world that is depicted here. And that's maybe one of the things that I really appreciated about how spare and kind of agendaless the point of view of the book is that it actually recreates the kind of tenacity of that worldview that's really, really hard to escape and difficult to live under, and you didn't coat it with icing. Someone has a hand up so that we can get another voice in here. So let's hear from Claire. If I don't know how to unmute, or if Claire can do that herself.
Can you do it, Claire? Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about, you said something about like removing your own presence from the relationship between Justine and Allie. And I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, I specifically meant being light with my authorial presence as an adult. So I've read and loved, actually, so it's not to say one approach is better than the other, but a lot of coming of age stories where an older narrator looks back and has different ideas now. Of course I didn't realize then that, and that was something that I wasn't interested in doing in this project. So that's the distinction that I'm hoping to make.
Cool.
Thanks.
There's one in here from Diana. She says, you mentioned a new approach to integrating image and text in the next novel in the trilogy. Did you say trilogy? Is Justine part of a trilogy?
I'm hoping.
Yay.
Yeah, that's what I'm working toward.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit more about what that will be? She asks.
Yes, and hi Diana. I'm glad you're here. So in this book, I looked at images as a kind of extension of Allie's interiority. So like black and white, like close up. You only see extremities for the most part. There aren't a lot of bodies and there are no faces. She's like a bit disconnected, right? And we're using objects to emote, essentially, and add texture to the way I'm sort of communicating her way of viewing the world. And in the next book, I'm interested in using images a bit more filmically to sort of the way that trauma or sort of intense experiences or repressed memories can kind of pop up when triggered throughout. And I think that there will be lots of bodies.
I mean, you do have this way with the like figurative, I think of the toenail painting illustration. Or is it toenail painting, or did I reinsert that into the thing? Did I just make up I
think you took a textual description of
I see
an image and
right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I was thinking maybe of this one too, the like kind of amputated figure.
Oh yeah, and who in the audience recognizes that as being very inspired by the Fiona Apple criminal video?
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this book is kind of like the criminal video come
yeah,
to life in a way.
yeah.
That
We need to
that
get
moment.
her. We need to get her a copy.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say she needs to get the Nobel Prize, which I think
That
maybe
too,
that's-
actually.
let's just say it. I'm calling it now. I want to hear from Adam Sika, who probably has a wonderful question.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you both for doing this, and pleasure to listen to you speak, Forsyth. And I'm excited to read your book and get it and experience it. For some reason, I just thought of this question about completing your books. So it's for both of you, and just curious to hear, what is it like for the both of you, like Forsyth with your book, Justine, and Catherine, in either your last book, Pew, or the 3 books prior to that, or if there's more, I apologize for that, but like the completing of the book, getting to the end of your work and letting it go and no longer working on it. What was that experience like for you, Forsyth, with this book, and Catherine, for you in your last or any of your books? I'm curious to hear about that.
Then we did this once together.
Mm-hmm.
Forsyth, maybe do you want to start? What is it like? You're right now in the thrush of it, you know?
Yeah. I think I understood that the book was finished when I just couldn't think of anything to do to make it better. Although this happened many times throughout the process, and there often were opportunities to make it better, and I had to rewrite and redraw. But actually, I've been really pleasantly surprised by like how separate I sort of feel from it, and how good I feel about just sort of letting it go. You know, I've had the advice that, you know, once your book is in the world, like what people say about it is none of your business. Which like maybe is like a little of a harsh way of putting it. But so far, like it's felt, yeah, like good to have it out there. And also I feel like I have kind of a healthy distance from it, and, you know, it's going to have its own journey.
Yeah. There's also like the weirdness of finishing a book for me is that I find that there's like at least like 20 false victories.
And that's right.
Yeah, there's like different moments where you're like, now it's done, and then like you're like, oh no, but then it's actually this other thing I have to do, and then you'll have another like, you know, moment where you're like, oh, I'm so glad the book's done, but that happens like 15 times.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point you realize that it's already happened several times, and so it starts to feel a little bit like Groundhog's Day. And then and then you have to do the copy edit, so that means like reading it over and over and over again, and every time
learning so much about grammar.
So much more about grammar than you ever thought you needed to know. I learned I should have never passed 3rd grade with the first book. When I got copy edits back, I was like, wow, there are just so many rules I just never got them. Nope. So I'm still I should probably take like a Zoom grammar school class or something. Anyway, there's one more question here that it looks really good, and we just have a few more minutes left, so I think we're gonna squeeze it in. This is from Molly Prentice. She says she thinks we're both amazing. I deeply feel that writing about the female experience, especially girlhood, is a feminist act. I'm stealing this phrase from a recent interview with Marissa.
I love Marissa.
But sometimes when I'm writing, especially about womanhood, especially the banal intricacies of it, I'm sorry with the pronunciation tonight, but intricacies of it, I begin to worry about being perceived as light or young or breezy or other such nonsense, when in fact this is full of a very specific darkness. Do you ever have these worries about being written off or misunderstood before people have assessed the work? And do you think about this at all? I will say I do think about this a lot, or I have more in the past. it was part of the question I was going to ask you about, like disordered eating especially is like a topic that I feel like has been part of the reason we don't have a good vocabulary around it is that women have been told not to talk about it because it's embarrassing and it's attached to vanity, and it's like supposed to be something that's like not complicated. It's just very stupid and childish, when actually it's like it's a mental disorder, you know, and it's like it's a real illness, and it's not really given the space to be that. It's like it's you know, shuttled under the rug in a way. And so I feel like once you recognize or re-recognize that that's a pattern, that's like something that's playing out over and over again, the faster you can just dismiss that feeling when it comes up when you're working on something or approaching work on something, as like, oh, okay, well that's harmful. Actually, like that's a part of society that I've absorbed and that is doing harm to my work right now, but is also generally harmful to the world at large. And so like, I have no use for this thing that's trying to harm me. Like, please, goodbye.
Yes, you know? I think that's right. And I agree with Marissa and thinking about it as a feminist act. And I've also seen a lot of thoughtful writing on this topic lately. So Samantha Hunt had like a really nice piece in the Times about taking teenage girlhood seriously. Right. There was just a piece about Taylor Swift like 2 days ago and her lyrics and taking them seriously. And a lot, I think, around framing Britney. Right. So like Tommy Gevinson's piece in The Cut, and another one in The Guardian that talked about like the way that the aughts treated female pop stars, that I found. And
there's that Lynn Steger Strong essay about that, thinking of Britney as like a young mother in crisis and having a postpartum depression and struggles, and that we didn't give any space to that, you know, culturally.
That's right. And so
it does feel like there's kind of a reckoning now with these.
I think so. I think there's a kind of re-examination of the time that I've sort of looked at here, and you know, that Britney rose to fame. And so, yeah, let's take up some space with it. Let's take a look at it.
At the same time, it's like, there's a part of me that's very envious of like teenage girls growing up now with like some of this understanding and space kind of happening, where I'm like, damn, like why wasn't I born in like 2005, you know, rather than like, you know, when I was born. And but I know that's not completely accurate, because there are things that we're being blind about now too. And so like, especially something like Justine is kind of like, it's the example of a type of girlhood that was non-negotiable, that was kind of one of the sort of a difficult to avoid type of girlhood that was kind of dominant in the time that we were growing up. And this is the example that we're looking at now, so that we can not make these mistakes, but also try and see what mistakes are still being made when we kind of use this book as a light to look at what are we missing now? What is it that seems totally normal now that actually is harmful and maybe not as generous to the complexity of children, but especially I think young girls.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I hope not to sort of end on a cynical note. But, you know, there was kind of like a liberation in the late 60s and in the 70s. And, you know, if we even think of sort of the earlier 90s and Liz Phair herself, speaking of exile in Guyville, you know, there are these ebbs and flows, I think, in terms of, you know, the place of women, or, you know, the place of sort of anyone in American society or in the world. And, you know, I think a lot of it sort of coming back again and again might be inevitable. And yes, having as many tools as we can to keep our wits about us is valuable.
Well, I think that's a great place to to end in a wonderful message to carry through into the rest of our lives, and one that's very much in the book. And I just want to congratulate you again on it. And it's beautiful, and you're beautiful, and the whole thing. I'm so happy about it. And I happily, Forsyth disappeared. I happily await the trilogy, the next installment. So
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to chat with you.
Yay!
Yeah, and thanks so much for having us, Exile in Bookville.
Of course, yeah.
We can't wait to come to your physical store when
know.
we're able to and when it exists.
Sometime soon, I hope. We'll close out real quick, but if we're talking about favorite illustrations, this one by far is.
The chip bag.
It took me a while to get it. Like I was like, where's her? Oh, Weighthead reference was pretty awesome. Catherine Forsyth, thanks for that wonderful and insightful conversation. And thanks to everyone for coming out tonight and supporting both of our guests and Exile in Bookville. Also, thanks to Becky, Nancy, Maisie, and Craig, and the staff at Tin House for putting Justine out in the world. Remember to go to the links provided in the chat and order both Justine and Pew that are guaranteed to come with signed book plates. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good night. If you guys can stick around, you two can just stick around for a little bit after we stop, or anyone wants to stick around after we stop recording, just to chat for a bit.
Sure.
Thanks again, everyone.
Super.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Thanks
for coming out.
everyone.